ES-strukturerna, det heter SUHF.
Okay, well, I'll have to speak into yours. Good morning, I'm Charles Hodgson, and I'm going to be...
To welcome you this morning.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be able to say some words at this annual event. And first of all, it is great to see that Europe still has so many friends of Europe. I should like to focus on my opening remarks on the subject which concern all of us, the future of the euro. This means also the future of the European Union. They have a common destiny. I was somewhat surprised by the grim wording of the invitation for today's State of Europe in this respect. It was about political frailty, strong pressure, fears. I will be more positive, I warn you. I know that it's not politically correct to be positive, but I will be positive. Maybe it reflects also those grim words, the economic mood of a few months ago at the time of writing. Because indeed, before the summer, the European Union was regarded as being very vulnerable and exposed. The problems are not over. I say this immediately. I felt it myself that that vulnerability and that exposure at the G20 of meeting out in Toronto late June, and we had just escaped from the crisis of the euro. We were considered at that time as the patients of the world. Now, however, the mood has somewhat changed. Although, as I said, of course, problems are not over. The latest IMF forecast for economic growth in the European Union are 1.8% for 2010, almost the same figure for the Eurozone. But this is double of what was expected just a few months ago. Obviously, we still need to do better in a structural way, but we are in better shape than a few months ago. By the way, it is perfectly normal that emerging economies grow more quickly than mature economies as that of the Eurozone and the European Union. But I repeat, we have to increase our structural economic growth even in a far further stage of economic and social development as we are in. Now coming to the crisis of Greece and the Eurozone of this spring, it showed some of the tensions inherent in the economic and monetary union. We needed time to find an agreement, but we found it in the end, on a mix of solidarity and responsibility. The member states showed their solidarity by setting up safety nets, and the countries with budgetary and economic problems showed their sense of responsibility by their reform programs. Both political decisions were taken also in the span of a weekend and later on, in the weekend of 7th to 8th of May. Moreover, a lot of decisions taken by the member states were unpopular, were courageous, were unpopular for some countries because of the austerity and the reform measures, and they implied, and for other countries because of the solidarity in the last resort they requested. The end result was positive. That's what counts in my opinion. The euro crisis showed above all the very strong political determination to defend the euro and the union. One should not underestimate, or to use a word which is in vogue, it showed the EU's formidable resilience. L'Europe est coriace. Our first political duty is to avoid a repetition of all this. And as you know, the European Council asked me to chair a task force on reforming economic governance. Next week is the last meeting. We will submit the final report to the European Council at the end of October. The crisis and in some way the financial markets have sharpened the minds. We have all experienced that policies of one member state affect all of us. National interests coincide in a lot of cases with the European interest. We have agreement on the main points, but the devil, as you know, is in the detail. Stricter compliance of the rules to a new set of financial and political sanctions, a stronger focus on debt sustainability, and these two things should help to keep public expenditures in check. We will also monitor countries' macroeconomic developments more closely, for instance, with the creation of an early warning system. It will detect the risk of real estate bubbles or of unsustainable patterns on the balance of payments. Good balance sheets are not enough. Competitiveness problems have been neglected in the first decade of this century, and they are as important as the budgetary problems. And fourth, thanks to the decisions taken in the wake of the crisis, we have a rescue mechanism for 3 years. Further work will have to be done to decide what we will do after that. I think we should be clear about what we are doing. All these reforms taken separately are small steps. Together, they are, and they can be a big step forward. Our efforts are thus directed to get more responsible behavior by the governments. I'm confident that the constraints of budgetary and macroeconomic surveillance and the pressure of the markets will help them to be responsible. The paradox is that this is the choice of the member states. They agree on setting up these constraints on their own policies. This will lay the basis for renewed confidence in public finances and more convergence in economic developments. The fundamentals of the Eurozone as a whole are sound as far as inflation, balance of payment is concerned. The problem were the divergences within the Eurozone. I think on that basis, as I've just described, we can do other work, create the jobs and the growth which Europeans expect. A concluding word. Since the outbreak of the financial crisis in 2008, circumstances forced politicians to focus on all kinds of negative measures. Crisis prevention, austerity measures, rescue schemes. I would call it the gloomy ambulance type of politics. It is now time for the EU and the national governments to highlight the positive measures we take. Investing in education and research, stimulating innovation, enhancing competitiveness, deepening the common market. But all this, most of them, all this also have a budgetary impact. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, the balance of payments of the Eurozone is in equilibrium. This isn't the case for by other world players. We need more global economic governance in order to correct these imbalances. The Eurozone and the Union are strengthening their own economic governance. Everybody on the world stage has to do his homework. That are my few introductory remarks.
Thank you very much. Before starting the discussion, simply a logistic remark.
Do you want to